The sun rose over the vast wilderness where Israel camped near the plains of Moab. From the heights of Pisgah, one could see the silver ribbon of the Jordan River and, beyond it, the hills of Canaan, the promised land, shimmering with promise and mystery. Yet within the camp, not everyone felt the same sense of security. In one quiet tent, 5 women gathered: Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah, the daughters of Zelophehad, a man of the tribe of Manasseh, who had died in the wilderness. He left no sons, and according to Israelite custom, inheritance was passed through male heirs. This meant that while other families spoke eagerly of vineyards, olive groves, and stone houses they would soon claim, Zelophehad's line risked being erased. His daughters feared that their father's name would vanish from Israel's memory, swallowed not by death alone, but by law and tradition. Mahlah, the eldest, looked around the circle of her sisters. She carried the weight of responsibility in her eyes. "Our father was no rebel," she said firmly. "He did not perish with Korah and his followers when they rose against the Lord. He died in the wilderness, as all men do, but not in rebellion." Her words struck deep. It was important to separate Zelophehad's memory from dishonor. To be remembered as a faithful man who simply died of natural causes mattered greatly in a society where rebellion brought shame. "But what does that matter if we have no share in the land?" asked Noah, her voice sharper, tinged with bitterness. "We are women. The law speaks nothing of women inheriting fields or vineyards. When the lots are cast, our father's name will be missing." Tirzah, the youngest, barely out of girlhood, whispered, "Will we have no home at all?" Silence followed. The enormity of their situation settled on them like desert dust. Mahlah broke the silence with words that seemed dangerous, almost rebellious. "Then we must speak." Her sisters stared at her. Women in Israel rarely stood before leaders, let alone made legal petitions. The elders of the tribes gathered daily at the tent of meeting to hear disputes, but those were almost exclusively men speaking for men. Women's voices were heard in songs of victory, in wails of mourning, in whispers within the tent, but not in courts of judgment. To speak before Moses himself, Hoglah asked incredulously. Before Eleazar the priest, before the chiefs of the tribes. They will laugh us out of the camp. Or worse, rebuke us. Perhaps, Mahlah admitted, but if we remain silent, our father's name dies with him. Do we not have a duty to him, and to ourselves? Milcah, thoughtful and cautious, said softly, and to the generations after us. If we are silent, every daughter in Israel will suffer the same loss. But if we speak, perhaps God himself will decide. Her words lingered like incense. Slowly, determination hardened in their hearts. The camp of Israel was not small. It stretched for miles, banners of each tribe fluttering above thousands of tents. The daughters of Zelophehad, dressed modestly but with dignity, walked together through the camp. Their steps were slow but steady, each stride an act of courage. Eyes followed them, some curious, some suspicious, some disdainful. At the entrance of the tent of meeting, where judgments were made, sat Moses, the prophet and leader of Israel. At his side was Eleazar the priest, clothed in sacred garments. Around them gathered the chiefs of the tribes, stern-faced men accustomed to matters of law, war, and inheritance. The daughters approached and bowed respectfully. A hush fell over the assembly. It was unusual, almost shocking, for women to stand there. Mahlah spoke for them all. Her voice was clear, firm, and unwavering. Our father died in the wilderness. He was not among the company of those who gathered themselves together against the Lord with Korah, but he died for his own sin. And he had no sons. Why should the name of our father be taken away from his clan because he had no son? Give to us a possession among our father's brothers." The words fell like thunder in a clear sky. The chiefs murmured among themselves. This was unprecedented. Women asking for inheritance. The law had never accounted for it. To grant their request could change the structure of Israel's society. To deny it could erase a faithful man's legacy. Moses did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked upon the daughters, then lifted his gaze toward heaven. Unlike earthly rulers, Moses was not guided by personal opinion or tradition. When faced with matters too heavy for human judgment, he went directly to the Lord. The assembly watched in reverent silence as Moses entered the tent of meeting. Inside, the cloud of God's presence descended, and the voice of the Lord spoke to him. "The daughters of Zelophehad are right," the Lord declared. "You shall give them possession of an inheritance among their father's brothers and transfer their father's inheritance to them. And you shall speak to the people of Israel, saying, if a man dies and has no son, then you shall transfer his inheritance to his daughter. And if he has no daughter, then you shall give his inheritance to his brothers." The Lord established a new statute in Israel, forever changing the law of inheritance. When Moses emerged, the people leaned forward, waiting. He lifted his staff and proclaimed the word of the Lord. "The daughters of Zelophehad have spoken rightly. They shall surely inherit their father's portion among his brothers." A gasp rippled through the assembly. The chiefs exchanged glances. What had seemed impossible had been decreed by God himself. Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah stood tall, not only vindicated, but honored as instruments of divine justice. Their courage had preserved their father's name, but more than that, they had secured a precedent for every daughter in Israel. Their victory was not merely personal, it was national, eternal, and sacred. The sun had already reached its highest point in the desert sky when the 5 daughters of Zelophehad found themselves walking toward the central gathering place of Israel. The names were Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. Together, they carried not only the weight of their family's story but also the burden of their future. The air was hot, shimmering with heat waves rising from the sand, but their hearts beat with a fiercer fire. For too long, inheritance had been seen as a matter reserved for sons, brothers, and fathers. For too long, daughters had been expected to quietly accept their exclusion, as though their lives and loyalty mattered less. Yet Mahlah, the eldest, would not be silent. "Father left no sons," she said to her sisters as they neared the camp of meeting. "If we remain quiet, his name will vanish, and his land will vanish with it. Is that justice? Is that the God of Israel whom we serve?" Her sisters nodded, each with her own fears but also with resolve. Noah's hands trembled slightly as she clutched her veil. Hoglah walked with her jaw set, her steps heavy with determination. Milcah whispered prayers under her breath, asking God for strength. Tirzah, the youngest, kept glancing around nervously, afraid of the stares they would surely receive. When they reached the tent of meeting, the place was already crowded. Leaders of tribes, elders, and men with authority were gathered, their voices deep, their discussions serious. At the very center stood Moses, the servant of the Lord, with Eleazar the priest by his side. The princes of Israel leaned in close, listening to judgments and matters of law. Whispers spread like wildfire as the 5 women entered the assembly. Heads turned, some men frowned, others chuckled, and still others looked away as though embarrassed. Daughters did not usually enter this place. But Mahlah stepped forward. With her voice steady, she addressed Moses, Eleazar, and the leaders of the tribes. Our father died in the wilderness, she began, and the assembly fell silent at the boldness of a woman speaking. He was not among those who gathered themselves against the Lord in the company of Korah, but he died for his own sin, and he had no sons. Why should the name of our father be removed from among his family because he had no son? Give us a possession among our father's brothers. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some elders murmured disapproval. Others folded their arms, waiting to see what Moses would say. Women asking for land. Women standing as heirs. It seemed unheard of. Moses did not answer immediately. His eyes searched the faces of the sisters, and then he looked toward heaven. He had learned long ago never to trust only in his own wisdom but to inquire of the Lord in all matters. I will bring your case before the Lord, Moses said. Relief flickered across the sisters' faces. Though nothing was yet decided, their voices had been heard. Their petition had been carried upward beyond men, beyond tribes, directly into the hands of God. That night, the camp of Israel buzzed with conversation. Some mocked the sisters, calling them bold and shameless. Others whispered with admiration, saying perhaps God himself had stirred their hearts to speak. Mothers looked at the daughters differently, and daughters began to imagine a future where their lives might not be hidden in silence. But the question remained, would God answer? Would he allow women to inherit, or would the daughters of Zelophehad return home empty-handed, shamed for their courage?